Welcome to the NDE World Podcast, where we explore the magical, mystical, and spiritual world of near-death experiences. And now, Ashton Lewis and Daphne Lynn.
Welcome to the NDE World Podcast. I am your host, Ashton Lewis, and my lovely hostess, Miss Daphne Lynn. Hello, Miss Daphne Lynn.
Hello, Ashton Lewis. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I am so excited about this upcoming episode.
I know, it's so awesome. I can't wait to be able to share this with everybody. Today's episode is actually going to be able to share an experience, well, actually several experiences.
Several
So
experiences.
we have an actual guest appearance today.
Yes.
That's going to be able to share some really cool stuff like paranormal type stuff and it's really wild
Spiritual experiences,
and,
yes.
oh my gosh, yes. And it's beautiful soul, so I can't wait to share that with you guys. You know, so I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, she's had a lifetime, literally a lifetime of experiences. And we see that with a lot of people that they experience these spiritual encounters from childhood. And that's the case with our guest today.
Yeah. So those who are here for the first time, welcome.
We appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Yeah, and for those who are returning, welcome back, and thank you so much. We love you guys so much. And for those of you who are new and aren't aware, don't forget you can go to the website, and that is NDE.world for more information on who we are, what we do, and all the good stuff like that, episodes and podcasts and different topics as well. So it's a really cool site to check out. Again, that's NDE.world.
That's NDE.world, and while you're there, don't forget to smash that share your story with us or contact button. We would love to hear from you guys.
Absolutely. Very good, very good. So, Miss Daphne, are you ready to do this?
Yes, let's get started. Oh my
I am
gosh.
so excited as well. Well, this beautiful soul is actually Miss Lorraine. She's got some really beautiful experiences, like Daphne had mentioned earlier. She had been sharing these, or actually has been experiencing this since she was a young child.
Yes.
So why don't we just go ahead and maybe kind of ease on over into the actual conversation and just go ahead and share this with the listeners.
Yeah. Before we do jump into the interview, she has had past life experiences. Yeah. She has had spiritual encounters with
entities.
People, entities, souls that she did not know. She's had departed loved ones contact her. So
pets, remember the
pets? Yes, she has a full story here to share with us, and from seeing auras and working in haunted hospitals. Y'all, it's very interesting, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did listening to Miss Lorraine's story. And thank you, Miss Lorraine. This is a beautiful, beautiful story. We love to hear more of your stories soon.
Okay, perfect. So I guess without further ado, why don't we go ahead and share this clip with everybody?
Sounds great.
Let's do it. All right, and we are rolling. Well, before we get further into the in our conversation here, Lorraine, let me, on behalf of the NDE podcast, thank you so much for taking the time to come out here and share your experience with us. And like I said earlier, we're so looking forward to hearing these experiences and things like that. So thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome, and thank you for asking me. It's a pleasure.
Yes,
No
thank you. We
worries.
appreciate you so much. I mean, we're just so thankful for you.
Yeah.
No problem at all. You just ask me questions and
Sure.
I'll answer. I've never done anything like this before, so
No worries.
I don't know.
It's going to be fun. You're going to
I
love
go
it.
on too much, stop me or whatever.
No worries. Well, I've got a couple of notes here that Daphne had mentioned to me that you guys, in you guys' conversation, that you've got a lot of experience in a lot of different things. So I'd like to maybe just throw a couple of them out there. And if you don't mind,
Sure.
which one would you ever feel most comfortable with? Then we'll just kind of maybe take it from there. But it mentions here you've had many paranormal events. That's very fascinating, and we do like to talk about that and share that. So anything in that area that you'd feel comfortable with, we've got that. The one about remember the one of the pet or the dog that was a ghost, the spirits? Because I've got
Yes,
yes ma'am, yes ma'am. I've got
yes.
a guy that I'm I'm doing publishing one of his books right now, and he has lots of experience in the pet world. So I'm very interested in
Oh,
that phenomena as well. So the pets do come back and visit us. So we've got that, if you don't mind. So you
sure.
used to see auras. I think that's awesome.
Used to see auras. I've had a few past life
Yes,
experiences.
ma'am. Exactly that as well.
I'll mention the things to you so you sort
Sure.
of know. Like I said, I used to be a nurse, and I've had my fair share of ghosts in hospitals too.
Wow.
I've had a couple of NDEs, and also when my husband died, which he died in tragic circumstances, and he would have hated leaving me that way. The paranormal things that happened after Steve died,
Okay.
and they were witnessed by multiple people. It
Wow.
wasn't just me. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yes.
Awesome. Yeah, we'd
Anything
love to
like
hear that.
that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
just ask away.
sure. If I may, let's maybe back up a little bit. I remember reading a little bit about the conversation with Daphne, where
Yeah.
you say these accounts actually go back when you were a young child. I would say you said like
Yes.
the age of four-ish, kind of. Does that sound maybe?
Yes.
And that
Yes.
you've
The
actually
first
started having
person.
those. Would you mind maybe sharing us with us? How it kind of maybe started, or
Sure.
okay,
Sure. Well, what happened was my parents were from the UK. I had an Irish father and a Welsh mother,
okay,
and we lived in Wales until I was 9. So the first house we lived in, we moved in when I was about 3 till the age of 6, and it was an old house, and it was about 80 years old. And so we used to have a room that we called the junk room. And that was the room where if we weren't using anything, it would go in there.
right.
So, yeah. So I used to go into the junk room, and I used to see a lady in a bed, an old lady. I never saw her face. She was always looking out of the window and looking, and we had a big lavender tree, and I used to see the lady there, and I mentioned to my mother once or maybe twice. I said about the lady in the junk room, and she said, well, what are you talking about? There's no lady in the junk room. So I knew it was something that I wasn't, I suppose, meant to be talking about. So anyway, I'd go in there occasionally if Mum asked me to put something in there, and it started off fine, but the more and more times over the months, she started to get angrier and angrier, and I could feel the anger coming out of it. So then one day I went in there, and I could hear her at the top of her voice, and it felt like her face was really close to me,
Ooh,
and she screamed, "Get out!"
ooh,
And it scared the living daylights out of me. And I would, if I ever had to go in that room, I'd just quickly open the door and throw something in. So anyway, I was about 6 and we moved out of that house, but we still had friends that lived in the street. So I think it's a bit hard to tell the time, but it would have been about 3 to 6 months after we moved out of that house. We came back to visit our friends. And as we were going down the street, the old house we lived in was burnt out. The roof was burnt, everything was burnt, and we were
oh,
shocked. So we go down to see our friends, and obviously one of the first questions is, what happened to the old house? And according to them, a new family had moved in, and they had a little boy about my age. And he tried to burn the house down 3 times, and the third time he succeeded. And I remember hearing that information thinking, I wonder if you saw the lady.
Imagine so.
Yeah, that was the first incident I ever had. However, I didn't know it was anything paranormal because at that age you don't know. It was only later in life that I looked back and went, oh, that's what that was. So that was my first incident, my very first incident.
Do you mind if we maybe ask you a few questions based on that experience before we go much farther? Or
Not at all.
that way we can kind of cover, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Of course, I'm absolutely very open to anything you want to ask me.
Okay, awesome. Daphne had a question as well.
Yeah. Okay. Now you were saying that the room was like a storage room, like a just a junk room, but you were seeing a lady in a bed. Was there an actual bed in the room?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
There wasn't, but I could see her, and I could see that she was old because she had grey hair. And you know, when you're a 4-year-old kid, any person with grey hair. But I got the sense that she was very elderly and infirm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you? Well, now that you're older and know a lot more about that, I mean, at the time when you did experience that, and I'm sure I can only imagine, so what did you think at that time when you first experienced that? Or did you know what to think? I mean, that's a pretty wild experience for a child.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't know what to think. And I didn't know at that age if everyone had that sort of experience. Because it happened to me, I just presumed everyone had experiences like that.
Exactly.
We hear that a lot when you have those experiences at such a young age. You think that everyone else experiences the same things.
Absolutely.
Another quick question before I lose my thought here on the experience with the old lady. I don't want to backtrack too much here before I got too far ahead of myself here. Now, you said that at one point you went in that you can actually feel the anger. You like everything was okay at first, but you had went in there once another time or something that you can actually you can actually sense that. But then you said that the old lady had screamed to get out. Was it an actual? What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say physical, audible in this realm, or was it like maybe a telepathic?
It was certainly telepathic.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah,
it was certainly telepathic, and it was like in my mind's eye that I could feel her face coming inches from my face and just screaming, "Get out!"
Okay.
Though I couldn't actually see it, but I could feel it, sense it, everything except actually see it, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
But I've had quite a few sightings of ghosts. So that was the first one, and at that age I didn't understand what was going on. But certainly later on in life, whenever I would see something that proved to be very strange, I knew what it was, and I knew the place that I could put it and say, well, okay, that's that. But when you're a kid, you don't know.
I like
and
how you
it's
said
all
that.
quite scary.
Yeah, bless your heart. It could be. So, did it affect you as far as like maybe nightmares or dreams or anything after that account?
No, I
Okay,
don't think,
good.
I can't recall
Okay.
it affecting my dreams, but I did have very, very vivid dreams
Okay.
as a kid, and I used to talk in my sleep a lot. And I remember my mum saying to me at some stage, she said, I thought you had someone in your bedroom last night. And I said, why? And she said, because you were having a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And apparently that used to happen quite frequently. And And yeah, and my parents actually used to check to make sure there was no one in my room, because it seemed that I was carrying on a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Now, that is amazing that you say that, because I actually know someone that they have a 7-year-old daughter, and they have a video set up for her room, and she sits up on a regular basis speaking with someone. So I think it's just that the younger generation, the younger people have that closer connectedness with source. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And from my perspective, I'm very lucky because, you hear of people say, oh, I can't remember before the age of 13 or 10. I've got very vivid memories of when I was younger, and I can still remember how open I was energetically, if that makes sense. I can still remember the feeling of being that open. And kids, I think, are born into this world and they're naturally open, and through society, conditioning, whatever,
Yes.
that's when we close down. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very receptive at a younger age, but we're taught and conditioned not to be. Like you said, yes, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, then you've got things of schooling, which, I mean, certainly in my day, the amount of times the teacher would say, Lorraine, stop daydreaming. And kids, that's a common thing that you hear with children. And school is not conducive to psychic ability.
Very well said. I like how you said that. That's true. It is so true.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think
true.
school destroys a lot of our natural humanity thingies,
Sure does. Yeah, sure does. I agree.
Another thing, and it'll be my last question on the old lady. It's the end, and we can move on. This is really fascinating. Now that you are, more mature and older, and then looking back at, at that 4-year-old child in that incident, what, in today's terms, your experience, what would you say you were dealing with?
I don't
Because it was
know.
something.
I've
It was
never
definitely something.
thought about that. That's a very good question. I think I was dealing with a residual energy that wanted to be there. That I don't even know if she'd actually realised she died.
Okay.
And I've never thought about it before, so I'm actually sort of on the hop verbalising it, but I actually don't think that she knew that she died.
Okay.
And she was, because this was her home, that was her room, and she didn't want this pesky little child going into her space.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so bizarre.
Yeah.
And it's kind of strange. Like you said, the other little family had moved in, and then the young boy, I mean, and you can't help but to think, did this little guy see something, and it might have scared him to the point that, I mean, you just don't know. Or
you don't know. Because how many children try and burn down a new house that they've moved into?
Yeah.
It doesn't usually happen.
Right.
And the fact that he did burn the house, and that was his third attempt to, and they hadn't lived there that long. It was probably, I don't know, say between 3 and 6 months that we had moved out. So he hadn't been there that long, and to try and burn down your new house 3 times
something,
says that you're trying to get I mean, kids do things, but it sounds to me as if he was not happy there at all.
Yes, ma'am. Pardon the interruption. How long were you guys there before you first had this experience, would you say? If you can recall.
Well, I don't know, to be honest,
Okay.
but I know, look, I moved out, we moved out when I was about 6, So I'd say this experience happened because it happened over a period of time. Because first of all, I saw the lady, and then the longer I lived there, the angrier she got. So this of seeing her would have probably I don't know, happened over a year or two period, because I'd seen her a lot.
Okay.
I'd seen her every time I went into the room. So from the time that I lived there, yeah. I can always remember her being there from my first memory of being in the house. I always remember the lady. So yeah, it would have happened over a period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
I do have one more question on this as well.
Sure.
What time, like year dress would you say she was? Was she like 1800s or
Victorian,
before
maybe,
Victorian? Yeah.
or,
How would you describe
No,
her dress?
modern? No.
I didn't see any dress that she was in. I saw her in a night dress.
Okay.
Gotcha.
But I only ever saw her in bed. That
Okay.
was, and only in that room.
And that would make
Um,
sense with what she was wearing. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
there was.
and she was always in the bed. She always had thick blankets over her. And I never saw her anywhere apart from the bed until that day she shouted at me, and I could feel her everything, like so big and close to me. Get out!
Wow.
And so I'd never seen her in any other room of the house ever.
I wonder if that was her room, possibly then.
Oh, I think it was. I think it was actually her bedroom. When the question was asked before, it sort of made me think about that in a more questioning way, and I'm pretty sure it was her bedroom, for sure. I've always felt that
Okay.
it was her room, her space, like I said, yeah.
Okay.
That's amazing.
She didn't want this kid in there.
Oh.
And that was the same with auras. When, I thought everyone saw auras. You know, I used to see full-blown colours around people. And it didn't occur to me that other people didn't see them. It just didn't occur to me.
Wow.
And I was in school, and I would have been about the age of 11, and we had a new teacher, a substitute teacher, and we'd never seen this lady before. And I was looking at her, and I'm thinking to myself, God, look at the colours around her. They look really weird. So I said to my friend next to me, I said, God, look at the colours around her. And she looked at me and she said, what do you mean? And I even did a hand action around my head, and I said, the colours around her. And she looked at me and she said, Lorraine, what are you talking about? And it was like I got hit in the head with a brick, because it was then that I realised that people didn't see what I was seeing. And that concerned me, because I thought maybe I was crazy or something. I didn't know.
Right,
And,
yeah.
yeah, because as a kid, you don't know. You don't know what's normal and what's normal. It's only when you're older that you can see, and you're more educated and have more life experience, that you can see, it's something that most people don't experience. And it took me about 18 months to train myself not to see auras.
Oh.
And I made a specific effort not to see them. And I had to change the focus of my eyes. That's what allowed me not to see them, was being aware of it, changing the focus, and then over time it gradually dissipated. But I mean, I still see auras now and then, around things, but nothing like I used to. Yeah, I
Wow.
used to see colours, everything.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you about that. Um, with you having to train yourself and everything to not see them, when you did
Hmm.
see them at the younger age, and even now, do you understand or have knowledge of what the colors or patterns that you're seeing around the person? Do you understand or know what that is representing in that person's life? Because I've read that
No,
some people understand what's going on in the people's aura field. Did you understand that as well?
no. When I was a child, I didn't. I mean, like I said, I thought everyone saw auras, and then it was a shock that I realised people didn't see them. So if I had that ability now as an adult, I'm sure I would be able to diagnose illnesses because different colours mean different things.
Right.
Because the colours when I was seeing them were so vivid, but now I see sort of like an energy outline. I very rarely see any semblance of a colour, but I do see the energy field around things
Wow.
occasionally. Yeah, not as often. And I might be looking at something and think, oh, I can see the aura, but it's not something that happens particularly frequently to me now. And I kind of wish that I was brought up in a family, or even this day and age, where certainly parents are more open to things of paranormal nature. I think if I was born in this day and age and explained what it was, I would have been able to retain the gift or whatever you want to call it.
Wow.
But yeah, back then I didn't know. I was just shocked that other people didn't see them.
Wow.
That really
Yeah.
shocked me.
So do you think you may have been blessed with gifts? Because you were seeing things at such a young age, or can we tie in? I hear a lot of time that children are more pure when they come into the world. That children can see things that even the adults may say, no, you're just your imagination. Oh, you're just seeing things. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me it's genetic, because I came from my heritage, as I was saying. My mother's Welsh and my father was Irish. Now, I know my grandmother on my father's side was quite psychic,
Okay.
and my father on my mother's side used to see UFOs.
Okay.
But back then you couldn't talk about it. So he used to tell me, but he wouldn't tell other people because back in the 70s, if you spoke about UFOs, people called you crazy.
Yeah.
And it was something that you talk about in hushed voices, not openly like people talk about it now. So I think for me it was genetic. Neither of my parents displayed any psychic ability whatsoever, and I think I just happened to get a double dose
Okay.
of
Okay.
it, and I think it's a genetic
I
thing.
was
I
going to
really
ask
do.
you, yeah, if you thought it might have been, or if you had any kind of, information that it was maybe in some kind of family or something. Okay, yeah. So you answered that without asking the question. Perfect, perfect. So you had mentioned that when you had naturally could see auras, and then it took you quite a while to actually retrain yourself to not see them by
Hmm.
adjusting a certain focus. My question is out of curiosity, and it seems like it would make sense, but could you do reverse engineering on that? I wonder, could people, if they want to like train to see auras, could they maybe train to adjust their eyes or focus a certain way, kind of I don't know if it makes any sense because you had mentioned you had kind of like
I think,
refocused, but
yeah,
I wonder if you can. What do you think?
yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I think people could. However, in saying that, that's the physical component of it.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think there has to be a certain energy transfer, if you know what I mean.
That spiritual aspect, yes. Gotcha.
So I'm sure people could have, older people, I'm talking about, could have a certain amount of success with that, but I don't think they would fully be able to train themselves to see the colours as I did as a kid, because they were very, very vivid. It wasn't wishy-washy. You had really distinct colours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's more just really just tuned into that spirit, I think. Seems like it would be.
Yes, I think so. I think it would be most likely a combination of things. You know, I'm sure you can
Yeah.
train your eyes to see the energy, but seeing colours is a whole different kettle of fish.
That makes sense.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move a little bit into the future as this kid's growing up, this young child, and growing up, and
Sure.
as you got a little older, you started.
Sure.
What would you say would be the next like really experience that you had, in that world, the spirit world or anything like that? Now, I do know you had mentioned about the hospital thing. We can lead up to that here shortly, but I don't know how old you were when you were working there, and so I'm sure you had some experiences there as well.
Sort of, later on. Well,
Okay.
the next, what I can identify
Okay.
as a paranormal experience would have been when I was about 7, 8. Oh, yeah, probably about 7 years of age. So we'd moved out of that house with the lady in the bedroom to another house, which was closer to the beach. And this was in Wales. And in the beach we used to go to didn't have sand, it had pebbles.
Yeah.
And we used to go to the beach and I would walk on those pebbles and I would see myself about the same age, a little black child. And I remember always having to be so careful on the pebbles because I knew that I had fallen over and broken my front teeth on when I was this dark child. It was like African, some sort of native child. And every single time we used to go to that beach, I used to see the scene before me. And I'd think, I've got to be careful. I don't want to break my teeth again. And I used to, I didn't know where this was coming from, but I didn't think too much about it either. I would just have to be really careful because I couldn't break my teeth again. So that was sort of when I was about 7. And so now, as I'm older, I can look back on that and say, well, that was a past life thing. And even now, as I'm talking about it and thinking about those pebbles, I've still got the feeling in my teeth.
Oh,
And
wow.
Amazing.
the physical feeling in my teeth, even just thinking about it. So that was probably the next experience, which as an older person, I could look back and say, yeah, look, I can understand what that is. And
Amazing.
through the course of my life, I've had several sort of past life incidents, and that was the first. So as far as paranormal things, that would probably be the next thing that's prominent in my mind.
Wow, yeah, that is amazing that you can just thinking about it still feel that experience.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can still, I can still, even thinking about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more of some of your other past life experiences?
Yes. Well, that was, like I said, my first, and then when I was about 12, we'd moved to Australia. We'd come to Australia when I was 9, and when I was about 12, my father he used to like to call himself as a confirmed atheist. He did not believe in anything. So I don't know what happened, but he decided that he wanted to look into the meaning of life and look at these spiritual type things. So he found a group, a spiritual group, which is about maybe an hour away from where we lived, and he wanted to get involved in that. So he decided that he would take me with him. So we went down to this spiritual group, and they taught you how to do things like psychometry, where you read objects, that sort of stuff, how to see auras, which I already,
already knew.
Yeah. For me. And how to go back into past lives and relive a past life. So we used to do these exercises, and at the end of the session that we had, and there was probably about, 12 or 14 people that used to go every week, we used to do a form of self-hypnosis and go back into past lives. So, look, for me, it was very vivid. It was very, and I saw this whole thing, but it did not convince me, even at that age, of past lives, because I was thinking maybe this is my imagination. Because I was actually very skeptical of a lot of things, and It really has to be proven to me. So anyway, the last time that we went, we did this past life thing again, and I saw myself as a nun, and I was in this damp, it was obviously some sort of church or whatever, but it was a small damp room, and I was doing this beautiful calligraphy. And I was actually writing a passage from the Bible. And then it went to my burial, and I could see exactly where I was being buried. And at that age, I thought that everyone got buried in the ground, in a hole in the ground. Okay. But when you go to England, you see that there's some people that get buried in like a square box that's above the ground. Have you ever seen those?
Like a mausoleum?
I think that's what it is.
Yeah. You know the type of thing I'm talking about.
Ma'am.
It's a square box above the ground.
Correct.
Now, I thought at that age, everyone got buried in the ground, but I knew I got buried in the square box, and I could see what it was decorated with, and I could see what was there. And so anyway, we came out of this experience, and we had to talk about what we saw. So it was my turn to talk about what I just saw, and I relayed what I just said. And so I finished, and it was my father's turn to talk, and he sat there quite dumbfounded. And he said, I saw the same as Lorraine, but I saw the burial. So the funeral and the burial. So we were driving home that night, and I remember my dad absolutely quizzing me. And he's going, what did you see here? What was that? Blah, 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 blah. And I was answering him. And anyway, after that, we never, ever went to this group again. Right? So anyway, maybe 10, 15 years later, my pop died, and I found out that my father's father died, and I rang up my dad and I said, look, Dad, I'm really sorry that Pop died. And he said to me, Lorraine, you should know more than anyone. We don't die.
Oh, wow.
So that effect, my dad went from a confirmed atheist to going through that experience, and whatever it was absolutely convinced him that there's an afterlife.
Wow.
From what?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So that was sort of fairly poignant. And I've had there was another incident I had where I had a reoccurring dream, and this reoccurring dream happened. I estimate probably over a 5 to 7 year period, and what would happen was I would see myself in a battle. And look, I think it could be Scotland, but I don't know. I think it could have been around the mid 1600s, but I don't know. That's just the feeling that I get from it. But I was a big, strong warrior. And over the period of those years, I saw the battle from the start to the finish. So what would happen was I would have a dream of this battle, and it was so vivid, and I could see myself killing people and stabbing people and chopping people, and I probably wouldn't dream about it again for another 6 months, but I would pick up where the last dream had left off.
Wow.
So by the end of it all, I had seen the entire battle. So the last dream I had, I can remember walking around, seeing this blood and carnage everywhere, and I could remember thinking to myself, yep, that's the smell of blood. Now, I've never smelt blood in copious amounts like that. And when I woke up for the next 3 days, and I'm not joking, I could smell that stench of blood in my nose for the next 3 days. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And after that, I had no more dreams of that at all. And, I just saw the whole battle play out, and that was it. But after that last dream, we don't smell blood like that unless you're in a certain type of industry where, I suppose they might smell it in an abattoir or something. I mean, I've certainly never been around anything like that. That copious amount of blood has a specific smell to it. And I don't think I've ever had a dream before where I smell in the dream, but to have that stench up my nose for the next 3 days had a big impact on me. It had a big, and then it sort of slowly faded away. But I know that was something that I'd lived through in a past life.
Wow.
I know that for sure. So that was a pretty sort of poignant one. And another incident I had too was I was fully awake, and Steve and I, my husband and I, we were sailing on a boat for 5 years, and we went into this harbour at the north of Australia. It was very sort of rural north type thing, and we went to this little anchorage because they had Aboriginal paintings. So we wanted to see it. So we got in the little tender, went to shore, and went up and had a look, and that was all nice, fine. And so as we were walking down, Steve ended up chatting to a couple of people, and off the beaten track there was this big, round, flat rock. And I thought, I want to go over to that rock. And it had all these signs saying, do not go off the path and all this sort of thing. And I sort of squished under the fence, and I went and I sat on the rock. And I had this incredible experience of all of a sudden I could see myself as an Aboriginal looking out at the same vista that I had from the rock, and I felt this overwhelming connection with the land. Overwhelming, and I've never felt like that before, and it really had an impact on me, and it I might have been there for a minute or two, and sort of I came back and I thought, wow, that was really interesting. So I got off the rock and I walked back to Steve, and it had a huge impact on me to the extent that I still remember it today.
That's amazing.
That's how much it had an impact on me. And it was like just this overworld connection with the land. And I thought, I now understand what Aboriginal people mean about their connection with the land, because I had it for a minute in that.
Yeah.
And I could see my skin. It was dark, and
Wow.
That was quite a powerful one I've had as well. But I think that's pretty well all of them with my past life regressions. But yeah, and that I mean, we go through experiences in our lives, and that sort of weaves the tapestry of my life. And that's why I have absolutely no doubt that the soul lives on, and that we have been here lots of times before.
I love how you said that. Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question, Lorraine, based on that comment you just made there. Now, I've heard, and if you don't mind, maybe give me your opinion on it, that we as humans have played multiple roles. We've played the kings and the queens and the peasants and the slaves, the soldiers, the priests, the male, female, nationality. I mean, we've done it all. Does that make sense to you? Would you believe that there's something about that? Because I've heard that, we have played all kind of different roles, and you've actually named a few of them here that you've had that experience with, like the little African boy and the nun and the strong warrior and the Aboriginal guy or gal. I mean, so you've actually firsthand experienced these things. Would you say that's probably some truth to that we've probably played all kind of roles throughout history?
I think we have, and I think we've had multiple lives. And particularly with children, I find them the best example. There's children that are born that remember their past lives. And there was a guy called Dr. Ian Stevenson, and he spent most of his career studying reincarnation in young children. And he did several experiments where children went back into past lives, and he actually took them to who they claim was their previous family, and more often than not, the previous family, this child could not know the information about their family that this child knows. So I think children are a really, really good example to look at, because they're not corrupted by, sort of society, and that comes with all different aspects of it. But I think they are our proof. And these children aren't just making up wild stories, because it's being able to be proven. And I think that there's no doubt that we've all lived past lives, and we've probably lived a lot of them, I'd say, a lot of them. And that's why you have an affinity to different things. Like some people really love Wild West movies and stuff, and other people love 16th century. And I think these things that we have an innate calling to have had some representation in the lives that we've led. That's why we're drawn to them, and that's why they feel familiar and nice. And I think, that we've definitely had a lot of past lives. How many? I don't know. Whether it's a handful, whether it's hundreds, I don't know. I don't know about that.
You would say we definitely did have past lives. We just don't know how many.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we could have had thousands for all we know. Yeah. We don't know. We seriously don't know.
The soul doesn't die. It continues on, so...
Absolutely. And maybe this is all a big computer game simulation for us to become
Right.
better souls.
The best
Who
version of us.
knows?
Correct. All soul growth. We totally agree with you. Absolutely.
So, you have told me in our conversations that you loved sailing and that you and your husband did.
Yes.
How long were you and your husband sailing?
Right. Well, when I say we, he decided that he wanted to buy a boat. And we were in a financial position to do that. And we actually had a conversation. He woke me up at 3:00 in the morning and he said, Dale, I want to buy a boat. And I went, okay, buy one. And that was it. So anyway, we ended up buying a boat. Steve was the sailor. I was really crew. And so we had the boat for about 18 months. And then Steve said to me, why don't we sail to Queensland for a year? We'll rent the house out and we'll go up to Queensland. So anyway, we decided to do that. He could get the time off work, I could. And we did that. And we ended up in a place called Cairns, which is far north Queensland. So it's a long, long way from Melbourne. It's probably about 4,000 kilometres from Melbourne. And anyway, we were renting the house and we had to decide if we were going to renew the rent for another year. And Steve said, why don't we sell the house and keep sailing? And I never thought I'd say yes, but at that point in time, I said yes.
Yes.
And I expected the house to take a while to sell. It didn't. It sold within a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And so there we were on the boat, and we didn't have any other ties to Melbourne. So we sailed for a total of about 5 years, and we sailed all the way up the coast of Australia, as I mentioned, then through Indonesia, Malaysia, and over to Thailand. And
Wow.
then we'd probably been sailing for about, 3.5 years. And Steve said, why don't we buy a bigger boat? And I said, oh, that seems like a good idea. Okay, let's do it.
Oh.
So we ended up buying a bigger boat and spent about a year doing that up. And then Steve said, well, why don't we do a test run around Borneo? So we got all the things we needed. It wasn't a new boat, it was a second-hand boat, and it needed a bit of work done, so we spent the year doing that. And so everything was good to go. So we decided to do that. So in order to get to Borneo, we had to go past Singapore, and we had to go through Malaysia and up sort of rural Malaysia, and then across to Borneo. So the night that Steve died, we were talking about the boat, and he said, I'm going to put all the sails up tomorrow to see what this baby can really do. And he was really excited about it. And anyway, he went off to bed, and I said, oh, I'll be down later. Now, normally, Steve would kiss me every single night before he went to bed. He would always kiss me. And I used to ask him, I used to say, why do you make a point of kissing me? And he said, in case I don't wake up in the morning. So that night, I'm lying there in the cockpit, and I thought, Steve didn't kiss me. I thought, that's really weird. And, it was sort of a fleeting thought. And then I ended up going to bed, and that was fine. Then about 1 o'clock in the morning, I heard Steve groaning. And I thought, gee, you must be having a bad dream. So I thought, maybe I should leave him. And I thought, no, I won't, because, I'll make sure that he's okay, because I had something niggling in the back of my head. And I thought, no, I want to make sure he's okay. So I went over and I turned the light on, and his eyes were open. And I thought, oh, thank God he's all right, because I sort of thought maybe something was wrong. So I went up to the bed and I went and shook him, and I said, Dale, you're having a dream. And he didn't respond. And I looked into his face, and his pupils were fixed and dilated. Oh. And being a nurse, I knew what this meant. And I started shaking him, and I'm going, Steve, don't you do this to me. And I'm shaking him, and I'm trying to slap him around the face, and there was no response, so I started doing CPR. And Steve always had a thing that his father had some severe strokes before he died. And Steve always said to me, I never want to be around if I've had a stroke. He said, I would hate to go the way my father did. So I'm doing CPR, and we're in the middle of nowhere, and this is rushing through my head. And I thought, oh, my God, I don't know if I can keep up the CPR. And even if I could, what happens if he's having a stroke? And I just thought, I can't do that to him. And one of the hardest decisions I had to make was to stop. And I knew that if I stopped, there wouldn't be any Steve coming back. And bearing in mind, we were on a boat for 5 years together, and you either become best friends or you get divorced. There's no in the middle with yachting, and so many people get divorced, but for us it was the opposite. We became very, very close. I mean, when we were living in the house, we'd both work, and you'd be lucky if you saw each other for 2 hours a day, and then when you're with your spouse 24 hours a day, you either sink or swim. So to lose Steve was, probably the worst, well, not probably, would be the worst thing in my life. So to have to stop was a devastating decision for me. And anyway, where we were, there was no one around, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to get help. And I was really in a daze. I just couldn't comprehend what was going on. And I went to the radio, and I was calling Mayday on the radio, and people were answering, but they were speaking Malay, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, and no one seemed to be able to speak English. So anyway, to cut a long story short, it took me probably about an hour and a half to get someone on the radio, but in the meantime, I would be going down to Steve, because at one stage, I was in so much shock and so devastated. I was sitting on the radio and I'm thinking, he's not dead. Like, how can he be? And I honestly imagine going in there and seeing him sitting up in bed saying, Dale, what are you doing? I've never been through such a time in my life, because it was just absolutely horrific. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I managed to get someone on the radio, got rescued, and then I was a suspect of murder until the autopsy came through, because I was in Malaysia, and I was under police guard with guns. the whole entire time until the autopsy came through. And I was sitting there thinking, God, what happens if they don't find anything? And it was just horrific. You would not want to wish it on your worst enemy. So anyway, in the course of that, I'd rung up his sister, told her the bad news, and she said, I'm coming out. And my best friend, whose name is also Lorraine, she said, I'm coming out. So that was great to have them there. So because I was in Malaysia, because it's a Muslim country, you have to have someone who's died. They're meant to be buried and cremated or whatever within 24 hours. But because of my circumstances, I had a dispensation, and we could wait 48 hours. So from the time my husband died to burying him was a very rapid time. You know, my whole world had turned completely upside down. So anyway, we had to have a funeral in Malaysia, and we had that, and there was probably about 30 people there, because we'd just gone to this come out of this port, and we hardly knew anyone. So it was really good to even have 30 people at his first funeral in Malaysia. So we had the funeral, and it was lovely. And then we had the wake at the marina, and the whole place was covered in glass, like the walls were all glass.
Wow.
And so you could see the boats, that sort of thing. So I'm sitting there with Jane and Lorraine at the table, and I look across and I see this big patch of condensation, and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that looks like Steve. And I'm looking at it, and I honestly did question, with the trauma that I'd gone through, I thought maybe I have gone mad. I really honestly did question.
Yeah.
I thought maybe I've gone crazy. And I said to Lorraine and Jane, I said, have a look at that. Well, Jane threw her hand over her mouth and said an expletive, and Lorraine said, that looks like Steve. And we're looking at it. Then someone came up to me and said, have you seen that on the window, the big patch of condensation? And I said, yeah, we're looking at it. And everyone was looking at this condensation because it had exactly the same shape: head, neck, shoulders. It looked exactly like Steve. And people were taking photos and all sorts of stuff. And so that was the first thing that happened. And coincidentally, I lived at that marina until I sold the boat, and I used to go past that section of window regularly, and never, ever did I see condensation apart from the day of his funeral. And so anyway, then the next incident that happened was I had come back to Australia. Steve was cremated in Malaysia, came back to Australia, and this was before his funeral. And I was sitting in Lorraine's lounge room. They'd all gone to bed. And at that point in time, I didn't know much about computers. Steve was always good on computers, so he used to do everything. So I didn't know a lot about them. So I'm sitting in the lounge room, and all of a sudden, Lorraine's computer turns on. And it had this flash, and it was flashing on and off and whatever. And I thought, what's that? And I looked behind me, and it was the computer. And it kept going on and off, and it was really, really annoying. So I went over and I thought, how do I turn this thing off? And I'm looking at it, and I'm thought, I better not touch anything in case, because I didn't know anything about computers. And so I went back and sat down and, as I said, the light was off and it kept going on, off, on, off. It was getting really annoying. Then eventually it turned off. So the next morning, Lorraine had got up for work and I was out having a cup of tea with her. And I said, I just out of the, just sort of a second-hand thought, I said, I think there might be something wrong with your computer. And she said, why? And I said, well, it kept flashing on and off last night. And not knowing anything about computers, I mean, I know a lot more now. I just thought maybe the computer was breaking down or something. And she looked at me quite puzzled and she's going, what are you talking about? And I said, your computer was flashing on and off. And she said, Lorraine, and she said, follow me. And we walked into her computer room and she went underneath where the plug was, and it wasn't even plugged in. And she picked up the plug and she said, Lorraine, look, it's not been plugged in. And like that really freaked Lorraine out, even though she'd seen the incident before. So, and sorry, I did forget to mention, when we were back in Malaysia, we'd had another major incident, which I'm sorry I forgot to mention. But what had happened was there was me, Lorraine, Jane, and the marina manager, a guy called Terence, who sort of got involved in the whole thing, and he was really, really helpful, really helped me out a lot. So we had gone out for lunch and we were in a restaurant, and it was an open-air restaurant, but it was really big and we were right in the middle of the hustle and bustle. And so anyway, we ordered our meal, and in fact, Terence actually ordered it in Malay, and the lady came out and she bought a big tureen of soup out and soup bowls, and that's what he'd ordered. So that was fine, and it was, steaming the soups, and she poured it in the little soup bowls, and that was fine, and we decided we were going to wait till it cooled down. So we were talking away, and all of a sudden the bowl sitting in front of Lorraine moves across the table and stops in front of me. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what just happened? And I looked up at the others, my companions, because I thought maybe I'm still at that stage. I thought maybe I'm losing the plot. And they were all sitting there with mouth aghast. And I said, did you see that? And they went, oh, yeah. And we were all talking at once. Wow. And Jane, Steve's sister, said, there must be water on the table. So Lorraine got a serviette, a napkin, and they run it over the table, and she sort of showed us there was no water. And I thinking maybe the table leg is shorter than the other, because you grasp at anything. When you see something like that, the first thing your mind goes to is there has to be a logical explanation.
Right.
So you think that there's a logical explanation. So the table leg wasn't shorter than the other. And then remember the show Candid Camera?
Yes.
It was an American show. Yeah. I thought that maybe we were on an ill-timed Candid Camera joke type thing, and I actually looked under the table to see if there was anything, and there didn't seem to be any explanation, and Lorraine picked up the bowl and put it back in front of her, and we go, wow, that's really weird, and Lorraine's saying, well, that's Steve letting you know that he's okay. All of a sudden, the bowl starts moving across the table again. Now, I had because I wanted to work out how this was happening. So as this was happening, I actually went down at eye level to have a look at the bowl, and I could see there was a little gap, that it was like if it was floating on
Wow.
this little gap. Because we knew this had happened the first time, and the second time my mind just went into bang, what's going on here? And as I looked down, I could see this little wee gap underneath the bowl. So it was like if it was lifted up a little bit. And and everyone, like, at that point in time, my best friend Lorraine, I've known her for 35 years, and I used to go to her with things that had happened, paranormal things, and I'd say, oh, you'll never guess this happened, that happened, whatever. And she said to me, Lorraine, I hear you, but I've never seen anything. So to me, it's just fanciful stuff. Well, she saw all these incidents that happened, and I remember at the time thinking, I wonder how this is going to affect Lorraine. And it actually changed her life. She'd seen it for herself, and it had a huge, huge impact on her, to the point now that she knows that what we were discussing, we don't die and the soul goes on. So that had a huge impact on her. And anyway, the next incident that happened was we had a funeral in Melbourne for Steve, and Steve's sister Jane rang me up and said, why don't we have release birds for the funeral? Because Steve and I had a business where we used to release, we used to call them doves, but they weren't. They were specially bred pigeons at weddings and funerals and that sort of thing. And Jane said, let's have birds. And I said, no, look, Steve wouldn't have wanted that. So we had the funeral. It was down at the beach. And, we all had lots of very nice things to say about Steve. Then me and his family, which there was 3 children, his sister, brother-in-law and me, we went into the sea to scatter his ashes. And we're scattering them, and we're passing the urn down, and all of a sudden Jane, his sister, grabs my arm and she screams, look at that. And I'm thinking, this is my husband's funeral, we're scattering ashes and you're screaming. Anyway, I looked up what it was, and it was a formation of birds coming, seriously, they were in a V formation, and they were so close that the last bird was probably about 3 foot from where we were standing, and they were so close that you could hear their wings flapping. And being on the sea for a long time, and we had sailors at his funeral as well, birds never go that close to the ocean, let alone when you've got a crowd of people there. And everyone at Steve's funeral were blown away at the birds, the sight of the birds, how close they were to us, and none of them even knew the fact that Steve's sister had been quite insistent on birds. But I sort of, it was too much for me to organise. I mean, I just had to get through his funeral, and I knew Steve wouldn't have been a huge fan of that, but there was a formation of birds there that really blew everyone away. And it was probably one of those things that you'd have to be there, but it really was a spectacular sight, and everyone went, wow. And the last incident, which was the most dramatic, happened with just me. And what had happened was I went back to Malaysia, and I had decided that I was going to sell the boat, But until I sold the boat, I basically had to sleep in the same bed Steve died in until I was able to sell the boat. And that was really a very, very difficult time. So I'd been back for maybe a couple of weeks, and I decided that I was going to clear out some of his stuff because I had to start doing something with it. And Steve used to do a lot of audio visual production. So he had a big locker with his video cameras, still cameras, all sorts of things. So I was cleaning through that and I was putting them in a bag, and I pulled out this little camera tripod. It's about 4 inches high, and it's for a camera. It screws in the bottom. And I remember when Steve got this tripod, and he loved it, and he was taking photos with it, and he loved this tripod. Anyway, I picked it up, and I took special notice of it because he was so fond of it, put it in the bag, and it was probably halfway in the bag by the time that I put the rest of the stuff in. So I had this big bag of video equipment and stuff, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do with this? So I decided to put it on the locker across from me. And then I decided that I was going to clean out his clothes. And I was there for about 30 seconds, and I just could not do it. And I burst into tears, and I was just so upset. And I came out and I sat. We had a big table, and I sat on we had a kind of bench seat, and we had a fan, and it was very hot in Malaysia, and I pulled the fan closer to me, and the bag that I'd put all the video equipment in would have been probably 10 foot away from where I was. So anyway, I was really upset, and I'm crying my eyes out, and I just happened to look up, and I see this thing speeding to my face. And my first thought was, that's going to hit me in the face. Then all of a sudden it stopped in front of me, dropped down, and as it dropped down, the button of the fan came out and sat on the floor next to me. And it was the little 4-inch tripod that I knew that was halfway in the bag. It certainly wasn't anywhere near the top. And I'm looking at it really confused. And I'm thinking, how? And I picked them both up, and I thought, how did that button come out? So I put the button in, and I'm hitting it with the tripod, trying to work out how the button came out, and I suddenly stopped, and I thought, how did the tripod fly through the air? And it was like I was in a shock, because when things like that happen to you, you like, a lot of it's shock. Like you don't know really what's going on. And my first thought was, how did that button come out? And then how did the tripod fly through the air? And it literally stopped in midair and dropped in front of me. But that happened when I was just there, so I've got no one else to verify it. But certainly the other incidents that happened, there were multiple people there that witnessed what went on. And even though I'd had these paranormal experiences all through my life, I still had, because I'm the eternal skeptic, I think, maybe it was my imagination, maybe. And I had 10% doubt that maybe I wasn't right, maybe I was getting the wrong end of the stick. But after that happened, and that was the biggest gift Steve could have given me, was to let me know that he was okay, because I loved him dearly and he loved me dearly, and it closed that 10% that I had in my brain. Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see why. That's beautiful,
it
really.
completely vanished. And I know, like I said, I know 100%. There's only two things I know 100% is that I exist. I know that I exist and that we don't die. Anything else is on the table, you know.
I
But
love
there's two
that.
things
That's the absolute
I
truth.
know for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's,
That is so
yeah.
beautiful, so beautiful. You have got,
Yeah.
oh wow, so many beautiful experiences. Now, on the haunted hospital experience, would you be willing to maybe share that with us,
Sure.
and then we can maybe wrap up after that?
So what actually happened was we'd had the death of I used to work, just to clarify, I used to work in a psychogeriatric ward, okay? So they were old people that had some sort of mental illness.
Yeah.
And we had a lady that died in our ward was like a T section, and her bedroom was right at the end of the top of the T, and she used to have a bathroom next to her. Right, so she died, and they decided to lock that bathroom because in case any patients wandered in there, because it was sort of right at the end of the ward, and you had to make a special trip to go down there. So there was an executive decision to close that bathroom. So strange things started to happen. And the first thing was that we would be sitting in handover at 7 o'clock in the morning. You have a meeting for half an hour, what's happened with other residents overnight, whatever. And we would be sitting there, and the buzzer would go off in this bathroom. Now, we all knew that it was locked. And at first we thought that maybe there was an electrical fault. So that was cool. So they called the engineers in, and the engineers couldn't find anything. So over the course of everything happened, the engineers actually came in 3 times because this buzzer kept going off in this bathroom, which this lady used to use, and there was no explanation for it. So then staff started reporting strange things that had happened to them. And there was some of the staff that would say, oh, you're all crazy, this is rubbish, you're all getting carried away and whatnot. But as time went on, even these skeptics started to see things, and they were the first people to resign and get out of there. So anyway, people started experiencing strange things. And what I experienced personally, a lot of things I've forgotten, but some things I do remember. And I used to work with a nurse called Julie, and we were in the kitchen. And this kitchen had perspex, so none of the patients could get to the taps, anything of that nature. And we were standing, talking down one end of the kitchen, and all of a sudden the tap goes on at the other end of the kitchen. And we're looking at this thinking, how did that happen? And so very weird things were going on around the place. So then the next incident that happened to me was I was showering one of the ladies who very rarely talked. Like, you would never get a word out of Marlene. She very rarely spoke. So I'm showering her and getting turned the shower off and getting her dry, and all of a sudden I hear a noise, and it's and I'm thinking, what's that? And I look around and I see the bin lid, and it's got, those flaps, the bins with the flaps that sure you must have them over there, but
Yes.
they've got a flap on. So when you put something in, the flap returns over the open part of the bin.
Right.
So I'm sitting there watching it, and the bin is going, and the lid is just going back and forth. And I'm looking at it. Marlene's looking at it. And I turned around to Marlene, who never says a word, and I said, "What do you think that is, Marlene?" And she said to me in a very deep voice, "Probably one of the ghosts that are around here." Now, that lady never hardly said a word, and for her to even speak that amount of words, but the context that she was speaking about
of all things
was like, And then the last thing that happened to me was I was walking up the ward and sort of we had bedrooms on either side, and it was before I got to the T intersection, and I saw a ghost. And I couldn't see any detail, but this was a lot blacker because it was dark up there. You had a few the ward lights that are underground just to light up the path, but it was pretty dark. And I could see this figure walking from the bathroom to the bedroom. And I looked and I thought, wow, and I went back to the person I was working with and I said, "I just saw a ghost." And I said, but it wasn't a patient. And this person was walking with determination. And I was quite confused, quite stunned. Anyway, a friend of mine rang me up because I was working night duty, and she rang me up during the day. And I said, "Oh, you'll never guess what I saw last night." And I told her. And I said, this person was tall and thin, and they were walking with determination. It wasn't a patient. Anyway, the next day she rang me up and she said to me, "I think you better sit down." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Bronwyn," which was one of the staff members who I worked with, had died, and her body was found 2 days after I saw the apparition. And I said to my friend, I said, that was who I saw. That was I used to work with this woman a lot. Yep. And it's not as if you see something and go and think, "Oh, that looks like Mary. She must be dead." You just don't think like that. And that was that was who I saw. I know it was who I saw. And like I said, this was a couple of days before her body was found. And, so that was my experience of the haunted hospital. And I did have another experience, actually, when I was first training. And I used to work with war veterans who because I was a psychiatric nurse, and they were all affected by the war. And in the mornings, we used to get them up for breakfast, say, "Come on, fellas, all go out and have breakfast." And there was 2 big wards, and they had about 40 beds in each. And in the middle was a laundry room where you used to get your clean linen from. But you couldn't walk from one dorm to the other because it was blocked in. So anyway, one morning I go in there and I'm saying, "Come on, fellas, come on, have breakfast," and they all get up, whatever. Anyway, there was a fella walking towards the linen room, and I thought, well, that's okay. He won't be able to get through anywhere, so I can go and get him. So I'm calling out to him, and I'm following him, and I could see him as clear as day. He walks into the linen room, and I walk in no longer than maybe, 10 seconds later, and I walk in, and there's no one there. Uh-huh. And I'm thinking, where has this man gone? And I'm looking under shelves, and there's absolutely nowhere this guy could have gone. And I was quite, like, whoa, what just happened? And
Wow.
being a student, I went into my charge nurse and I said, I just had the weirdest thing happen to me. And I told him what had happened, and he sort of very casually said, oh, yeah, that's the Tuesday ghost. And I
Wow.
went, what? And he said, yeah, a lot of people have seen him, but only on a Tuesday. That's why we call him the Tuesday ghost.
I said, isn't that something? The Tuesday ghost.
It
That's
is.
amazing.
It is. So that was my sightings at hospitals and my experiences at hospitals.
Wow. So lots and lots of paranormal stuff throughout your whole life. That is amazing. And some people would look at it, and I've read this, some people look at it as blessings, some people look at it as curses because it's so shocking to the system when you're not used to it. So how would
Even when you are used to it, it's still a shock to the system.
I imagine, yes, I
bet it
imagine
is,
so.
yeah.
I would like to ask you one more thing on the ghosts that you've seen. You had mentioned to me in our previous conversations about a pet. For our people out there that have had pets transition and worry about their pets, what can you tell us about what your experience was with your beloved pet?
Sure. When we came to Australia, as I mentioned before, I was about 9. And when we were in Wales, we had a dog called Juno. And that was my first dog, and she was beautiful, lovely dog. And she used to wait for me when I was coming home from school, and she used to see me come over the hill and run and, come to me, that sort of thing. We had a very special relationship because I was an only child, and I think having an animal, particularly if you're an only child, you become quite bonded. So we came to Australia, and my parents said to me, we can't take Juno, that was the dog's name, because she would have to spend 6 months in quarantine, and that wouldn't be fair to her. So my parents had decided to leave Juno with my mum's best friend named Kitty. So that was fine. We came out to Australia, and my parents knew how much I missed Juno. So we got another dog relatively quickly. So this would have been about 18 months, maybe 2 years after we came to Australia. And I was lying in bed. I was asleep, and all of a sudden I woke up and I sat up in bed. And I still remember the air was like if it was charged with electricity. It was like something really unusual about the air. And I sat up in bed and I looked and I saw Juno sitting on my lap. And the first thing I thought was Mum and Dad have brought her over from Wales and have surprised me. And I'm sitting there talking to Juno, and I could have been there for 2 minutes, 2 hours. I really don't know. And because time didn't sort of seem to have any meaning. And I reached out to touch her, and she disappeared before my eyes. And I can remember being really, really confused. And I laid down, and I can remember it like if it was yesterday. And I laid down, and I'm thinking, what just happened? So I eventually fell asleep again, and my parents' room was right next door, and got woken up with the sound of the phone ringing. So I got up and I went into my parents' room, and my mum was on the phone and she was crying. So she got off the phone and she said to me, I've got some bad news for you. Juno got run over by a truck and she died.
Oh.
And I can remember thinking, but I saw her last night. And
Wow.
it really, really confused me because I knew that I'd seen her last night, and I know for a fact it wasn't a dream, and I was really, really confused. And I don't think even at that age I really knew what a ghost was. And so I didn't connect and it was only later on in life that I thought, oh, that's what it was. But yeah, so that's always given me comfort in my life because I know that little furry loved ones that do have a soul and they do go somewhere nice. I really do know that for sure. And that was her coming back to me saying goodbye. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
And that,
Wow.
yeah. And that's always, like, I've always been very, very close to my pets, and it's always given me comfort to know that. And for anyone that has lost a pet, and it's like losing a family member, just rest assured to know that they are okay. They are okay.
It's definitely, it gives you a different perspective, doesn't it? We've heard so many experiences where people, their pets have transitioned, and even people like with NDEs and things like that, sometimes the pets are the first to greet them. I don't know if you've ever heard, experiences like that.
I have.
Yeah,
I have.
so the pets are amazing. Animals are amazing. They're beautiful souls, and like you said, just never underestimate it. Those little guys and gals and little creatures, they are little souls, like you had said earlier.
They certainly are, and they're certainly their energy, their spirit does go on, and the fact that people have NDEs and they do see their pets, I think, is testament to what I'm saying as well. And what you're
Yes.
saying. They do go on, and the whole universe is about energy, and they have the most beautiful energy we know. I mean, they use pets for all sorts of therapies, and it works, and there's a reason for that.
It does. You're absolutely right. You were so right, so right. Well, I tell you what, Lorraine, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. If I may, I would like to maybe ask you a couple of final closing questions, just to kind of transition over into kind of easing things up here and wrapping things up. I've got one for you here. What have you, as Lorraine, what have you learned from all of these experiences? From a young child growing up, and what have you learned that's kind of affected your life in some kind of way?
Yeah, what I've learned is that the soul doesn't die, and that gives me a great degree of comfort, because I actually don't take life too personally, and if we understand that what we are going through now, is a transition, and it's not the be-all and end-all of everything, it takes the pressure off life. And that's something that I've really grown to appreciate over the
Beautifully
years.
said.
Yes, beautifully said. And with this knowledge, it releases fear of what we call the afterlife, that next phase of life.
Absolutely. And, you hear a lot of NDEs where people say to pass into the next realm, it's like shedding off clothes.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. And we are eternal beings. And if if people just get that it's not that serious. As long as you're a good person, you do the right thing, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. And there's no point in getting too serious and head up about it, because it's just another experience in our transition of being a soul. And I really, really do believe that wholeheartedly.
Yes.
I love how you said that.
Yeah, I do too. That was beautifully said. And we definitely believe the same here. Now, I have one more question. I don't know if Ashton has any more, but my final question would be, what words of wisdom would you love to share with our listeners?
What words of wisdom?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what I just said. Don't take life too personally. And when someone does pass on, understand that they're not dead and you will never, ever see them again. They have just transitioned before you. And death is very painful to us all. But if you look at the bigger picture and understand that this isn't goodbye, it's see you later. And that's what it is, because I think that we all have our soul groups, we all have people that we often incarnate with. And, in the last life, you probably went earlier than them. And just try not to take life too personally, because it's not here to be horrible. And we all have a choice of making this heaven or hell. And we see people who are in the worst circumstances, or what we consider the worst circumstances, some of the happiest people. I've seen poor people in foreign countries who are the happiest people on earth. And, just don't take it too personally.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I love how you said that. Words of wisdom, guys. Words of wisdom. Well, perfect. Lorraine, thank you so much, love, for sharing your time and experience with us. We're so grateful for you. And thank you so much. You have such a beautiful soul and such beautiful stories.
Likewise.
Yes, and we love you
been
so
a
much. And thank
pleasure.
you for taking the time, as well. So, Daphne, any closing words there for Miss Lorraine? Or?
Yeah, just we really appreciate you and love you for sharing your experiences with us. I mean, we can gain a lot of knowledge and understanding of what's going to happen in that so-called afterlife here. And I love the fact that it releases fear. So thank you for sharing your words of wisdom with us and your experiences.
You are more than welcome. And thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Yes.
No worries. We thank you so much. And may peace be with you, love, and blessings, and just hang in there. And until we all meet again in the big picture, blessings be with you, love.
Blessings be with you too. Thank you.
Thank you
so welcome.
much.
You have an awesome evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if you ever want to chat again about these experiences, you know where I am.
We would love to hear. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
We love having same guests multiple times.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever want to and you think, we'll chat to Lorraine, just let me know, please.
Yes,
I'd be
because
more than happy.
you just
Awesome.
mentioned something that I'm really into. You had mentioned soul groups and stuff. So if you have some wisdom for that, you could share it another time. We would love to have you on again to discuss that.
Okay.
Just anything, really.
Okay.
Yeah. She's got a lot of knowledge. Yeah.
Yes,
Experiences.
yes.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful soul.
Yeah. That we'll do that at a later date. And
Yes.
just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
You
and it's
as
lovely
well.
to talk to such beautiful people as yourselves.
Thank you.
We love
as
you so
well.
much. Thank you so much for your time, Angel. You have a good evening.
Thank you. Same to you then.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow.
Both of us wow at the same time. What do you think about that, Daphne? It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, such beautiful stories. I mean, as a child, not knowing any different, it's shocking, and you think that everybody experiences the same thing.
Yeah.
But as you can see, they definitely do not. We know that from the world we live in. Just there's so many out there that do encounter and have these types of events that are aware of past lives. I mean, she has such an array of stories here.
Think about that.
So yeah, I mean, where to begin? What would you like to comment on first?
D, all of the above.
Yes, of
I
course.
loved all of it. Yeah, a beautiful soul, beautiful
She
stories.
is, yes.
Yeah, speaking of the past lives, that was pretty fascinating. Those experiences as the different characters or the different errors of the different, people or entities. And that really ties in with a lot of stuff we learn from these NDEs. And even the big picture is that we're so much more than this avatar that we're incarnating in at the
Yes.
moment. And, you actually can incarnate and come back and incarnate again and incarnate again, which is what we call reincarnate, reincarnation.
Right.
And you get to play all these different roles. You don't think about that. Like when I was growing up within the Christian religion, you don't think about that. I
You're
thought
not
I only
taught
had
that.
one life.
Right.
You hear, you do what's right, and if not, you'll either go to heaven or hell when you die. That's it. Bam, game over. That's what I was, and you don't think anything different. But as I got older and started thinking about it and really getting into it and searching this stuff, it's like, whoa, no.
Yes.
It's way bigger than that. We are so much bigger than that. And life goes on. It goes on. It goes on.
Right. I like the way she said that her dad had brought it. He said, "Don't worry, we don't die."
Yeah.
So.
And then him coming from maybe an unbelieving or an atheistic kind of type
Yeah.
background,
Yes.
to having that spiritual insight, that there alone is priceless. So.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite past life experiences hearing from her on hers was when she saw herself as the Aboriginal and the connection with the land. It just made me think, because I have some Indian in me, how the natives here in America were connected with the land as well. And that's what I feel like humanity needs to get back to, is connecting with Mother and just opening up and being aware of the things that are around us. That
Yeah.
connection that all things have, that oneness that we're taught and have learned about.
We've lost that
Yes,
along
we
the
have.
way. But thank goodness a lot of us are finding it and searching and
Yes.
waking up, and and there's a movement going on. There is an awakening, and people are becoming more awakened to a whole different paradigm. So what else, Miss Daphne, did you find interesting about this?
Oh, the whole thing, like you said, her seeing the auras of
Yeah.
people, and it reminded, when she said that all things are energy, and she saw the energies, it reminded me of the Curlian photography,
Yep.
and it's a beautiful thing that she has this gift of, and she says she can still see them even after she trained herself not to see them, because she realized that no one else saw them, that she was around. So that's an amazing gift there, to see the energy of others.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I don't know where to even start to even try to imagine the experience offshore, out on the
Right.
sea with her and her husband. And I'm glad that she has that understanding as well, that life goes on. That has
yes.
to be traumatic in its own way, but beautiful, knowing that, hey, there is so much more, but just being in that kind of experience, such a strong soul, to be able to come through that on the other side, and that's so commendable. That's just such an awesome story.
It really is. It really is. I mean, and even her husband, making those contacts with her through those many different times, through her own experience when she was alone, to others being a part of it as well. It is that soul reaching out, that life continuing on.
That's right.
And that is something that when that happens, like she did, most of us just really try to rationalize it and give logic to it. This isn't happening. How is this happening? Just different things that the mind does, because it's a shock to the system, you know. So there's beauty in it, but there's also that, oh my gosh, you know.
So what do you think about the hospital episode?
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. Multiple counts, and not just her seeing the things there.
Other people.
Like the Tuesday goes.
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah,
Mr.
you know,
Tuesday.
so it's across the world.
Yeah.
You know, the sightings and experiences of people.
And the reality is there is so much more out there that we don't know, and we're learning about. And that's the beauty of having these beautiful guests on, to have these firsthand experiences and share their experiences, because they are actually experiencing this. You know, we're not reading it, we're not watching it on TV or whatever. You know, we're actually talking to real people with real experiences. So that really to me takes it to a whole different level.
It really does.
So that's what I love about it.
Yes, it really does. And I think I have one final one
Sure.
for the pet lovers out there.
Yeah.
If you worry about your pets, you know, if they're okay or whatever, from Miss Lorraine, her experience with her beloved pet, Juno.
Yep.
I mean, that is amazing, you know, and right there, the soul continues on.
Right. Animals are souls.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, Miss Daphne, thank you. Thank you for that interaction and the comments. And thank you so much, Miss Lorraine.
Yes, thank you.
We love you and appreciate you and your experiences and your time. And thank you all listeners as well. We love you guys. And thank you so much for tuning in. And again, don't forget to go to the website. That is NDE WORLD for more information on who we are and what we do and all that good stuff. So with that thought in mind, we love you so much. May peace be with you all. Until next time.
Y'all let your light shine.
For information about the NDE World Podcast, visit NDE.world. That's NDE.world.